The dumpster behind you smells like the end of the world. Good. That means everyone else walked past it, and everything they left inside just became yours. Here's a truth that survival forums, prepper podcasts, and gear-sponsored YouTube channels have quietly been avoiding. The item that saves your life in a real collapse probably isn't in your bug-out bag. It's in the debris. It's in the rubble. It's wedged under a collapsed kitchen counter in a building 3 blocks from wherever you're reading this. The ancient frontier trappers knew this. The soldiers who outlasted brutal sieges in medieval Europe knew this. And now, you're going to know it too. This is the list nobody makes because nobody wants to admit that a crumpled piece of kitchen foil might one day matter more than a $400 multi-tool, but history doesn't care about your pride. 7 items, all free, all scavengeable, all potentially the difference between making it and not. The kitchen foil nobody touched. Aluminum foil sits in gutted kitchens untouched because nobody thinks of it as gear. That is a massive, life-threatening error in judgment. Aluminum reflects approximately 95% of radiant heat. Emergency blankets, the ones that run $12 at outdoor retailers, are nothing more than foil with a logo on the packaging. You just found the same material for free, probably in multiple sheets. Wrap it around your body in cold conditions, and you are retaining heat at a rate that would genuinely impress a physicist. But the thermal property is just the beginning. Shape foil into a shallow parabolic curve and, well, you have a solar concentrator. Point it at dry tinder on a sunny day and you can start a fire without a spark. Ancient cultures understood reflective fire starting long before modern metallurgy, using polished metal bowls and bronze mirrors for exactly this purpose. The geometry doesn't need to be precise. Curved and roughly focused is enough. Foil also works as a signal mirror visible for miles under direct sunlight, a food-wrapping material that slows bacterial contamination significantly, a lining for improvised solar cookers, and, critically, a rudimentary electromagnetic shield. In a collapse scenario involving electromagnetic pulse, a foil-wrapped container around your batteries, your radio, or your small electronics acts as a Faraday cage. It won't be perfect, nothing will be, but imperfect shielding is infinitely better than none. Pocket every scrap you find and move on. Glass bottles are infrastructure. Look at a collapsed city street and you'll see glass everywhere. Most people see a hazard. You need to start seeing a water treatment system, a fire-starting kit, and a cutting tool, all in one object. SODIS, solar water disinfection, is a field-tested, scientifically validated method used in disaster zones across the globe. Fill a clear glass bottle with water. Leave it in direct sunlight for 6 hours. The UVA radiation that penetrates the glass systematically destroys pathogen DNA. No fire, no fuel, no chemicals, just physics and patience doing the work for you. Beyond water treatment, the curved base of a bottle acts as a focusing lens, capable of igniting tinder under direct sun. A broken bottle end, wrapped in cloth for a handle, becomes a blade that never rusts and never dulls. A bottle with a narrow neck controls liquid pour for flammable materials. Every bottle you pass is a tool set. Stop walking past them. So, let's talk about rubber hose and the science of siphoning. Rubber tubing is, honestly, everywhere in the wreckage of the modern world. Old cars still sitting on dead roads, collapsed garages, gutted appliances, you name it. The humble rubber hose connects you to resources that would otherwise be inaccessible. The obvious application is fuel siphoning. Abandoned vehicles often retain significant fuel in their tanks months or even years after a collapse. The hose is what gets it out. Just, don't swallow any in the process. Hydrocarbon ingestion damages liver function and won't help your situation. Now, the less obvious application is distillation. You can coil a length of rubber tubing through a container of cold water and then attach one end to a heated vessel containing your water source. Steam travels down the coil, cools, and condenses into collected liquid at the other end. Steam doesn't carry dissolved salts, heavy metals, or biological contaminants, so what drips out is effectively distilled water. Roman military engineers actually used rudimentary condensation systems for field water purification in campaigns stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia. The physics hasn't changed. The hose also works as a tourniquet, a slingshot band, a container seal, or even a bellows for fire. Rubber degrades slowly, so if you find it, keep it. Steel wool and the battery nobody thinks is dead. Here is something that sounds impossible until you see it happen. Touch a 9-volt battery to a pad of fine steel wool rated at quadruple zero grade, and it catches fire in under a second. No flint, no lighter, no dry conditions required. The science is pretty straightforward. The iron filaments in fine steel wool have an enormous surface area relative to their mass. When a weak electrical current heats those filaments, iron oxidizes rapidly. The reaction generates its own heat faster than ambient moisture can suppress it. That means steel wool ignites in damp conditions where every other fire-starting method fails. And that 9-volt battery you threw away because it couldn't run your flashlight anymore, it still has enough residual charge for this. Beyond fire starting, steel wool actually filters particulate matter from water before it passes through finer filtration media. It also cleans metal surfaces before you make improvised repairs, and, if you pack it into gaps in walls, floors, or ceilings, it stops rodent intrusion permanently because, mice just won't chew through material that shreds their soft tissue. In a long-term shelter situation, honestly, that last application alone more than earns the weight in your pack. Plastic sheeting keeps you alive in ways you probably don't expect. It's everywhere in partially constructed buildings, gutted warehouses, and collapsed commercial spaces. Yeah, it's boring, but it's also one of the highest value materials you can carry in a survival scenario. The critical function most people miss is the vapor barrier. Wind moving across a wet surface strips body heat through convective cooling at a rate that's actually far more dangerous than still cold air. Hypothermia kills quietly, and, in many climates, it does it faster than dehydration. In its early stages, hypothermia impairs the very judgment you need to survive. Plastic wrapped around the body interrupts convective heat loss completely. On the water collection side, a plastic sheet stretched at an angle with a container at the low point captures rainwater with zero ground contamination. A plastic-covered depression in the ground with a weight in the center becomes a solar still. Ground moisture evaporates in sunlight, condenses on the plastic, and then drips into a container at the lowest point. It is slow, but it is also free water from literally nothing but sunlight and your effort. Survivors of the 1970 cyclone that devastated Bangladesh used improvised sheeting systems for water collection in the weeks following the disaster, when every other clean water source had failed. The physics hasn't changed, neither has the effectiveness. Copper wire is the nervous system of survival. You can strip it from walls, pull it from dead appliances, and salvage it from electronics. Copper wire is the second most electrically conductive metal on Earth, right after silver, and let's be real, silver isn't lying around in gutted apartment buildings, but copper is. For any electrical repair, improvised radio circuit, battery system, or signaling device, copper is absolutely non-negotiable. Aluminum corrodes under oxidation, and steel, well, it barely conducts. Copper works, and copper is available. Set a copper wire snare on an animal trail, and it works while you sleep. It doesn't rot, doesn't stretch, and holds it set pretty much indefinitely. When you're in a caloric deficit, passive protein acquisition isn't optional. It's just arithmetic. You need calories, and you simply can't hunt 24 hours a day yourself. Now the third property, which almost nobody talks about, is oligodynamic action. Copper kills bacteria on contact through a slow, passive chemical mechanism. Ancient Persian and Ayurvedic medical traditions actually stored water in copper vessels for this exact reason. thousands of years before anyone even knew what a bacterium was. Modern research has confirmed measurable bactericidal effects against E. coli and similar pathogens. Sure, a copper coil submerged in a water container won't replace filtration, but it gives you a continuous passive defense that costs you nothing. Charcoal from any fire you've already made. Every single fire leaves charcoal behind. Most people, honestly, just let it go cold and walk away, but that charcoal is actually a water filter, a deodorizer, an emergency medical tool, and a fire-starting advantage, all packed into one compact, almost weightless material. Now, activated charcoal, the pharmaceutical version, is made through high-temperature steam processing. Charcoal from a campfire isn't activated, but its basic adsorptive properties still work. When it's packed between layers of cloth and sand, crushed charcoal can trap heavy metals, organic chemicals, and even some biological contaminants from water passing through it. It won't replace boiling or UV treatment, but it really does improve water quality when used as a pre-filter stage before those methods. Ground charcoal applied to a wound acts as a topical antimicrobial and absorbs toxins. Back in the 19th century, physicians in field hospitals actually used poultices of crushed charcoal for infected wounds when they didn't have anything better. It was imperfect, sure, but, imperfect and free has historically outperformed nothing at all, and when you mix it with a fat-based binder, crushed charcoal becomes a fire-starting compound that catches really easily and burns slowly. So, you've basically turned the waste product of one fire into the starting material for the next. The gap between surviving and not, it's really about 7 items, all of them free, all of them just sitting there in the wreckage that most people walked right past because they were looking for the gear they thought they needed. The historical record on survival isn't honestly a story about strength or speed or expensive equipment. It's a story about pattern recognition, the people who made it through the worst conditions in recorded history, from the survivors of the siege of Leningrad, scavenging machinery for heat, to Pacific Island castaways building distillation systems from salvaged metal, to frontier settlers improvising entire infrastructures from found materials. They all shared one consistent trait. They looked at discarded materials and understood what those materials could still do. Science doesn't stop working just because civilization does. Thermodynamics doesn't take a day off just because the supply chains failed. The laws that make foil reflect heat, copper kill bacteria, glass focus light, and charcoal filter water. Those are the same laws they were before all of this started. The dumpster behind you might smell like the end of the world, but go back and look at it again. This time you'll know what you're looking at.